Thank you for joining our virtual webinar, where today we're going to be talking about how to enter the shamanic realms. With us today to lead us through this very exciting topic is Amara Charles, Amara Keeps the Fire, and Greg Magic Bernstein. So let me just introduce these lovely teachers. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce them. Amara has been leading retreats around the world for over 30 years and is the best-selling author of Sexual Practices of Quidoshka and Sexual Agreements. As a shamanic ceremonialist, Amara is a 7th gateway apprentice to the sweet medicine Sundance path of Turtle Island. She recognizes the intricate process of healing and awakening unfolding for so many around the planet at this time, and offers retreats as well as private sessions. She is deeply influenced by the shamanic and Buddhist lineages and is a lover of the world's greatest traditions. And she also speaks internationally and writes about a variety of subjects, including the divine feminine. And I also like to introduce Greg Magic Bernstein. For almost 20 years, he has studied with teachers, elders, the Kuna, shaman, and Western masters, and has been leading sacred voyages for decades. His unique and sometimes mystical approach to create a powerful shamanic transmission of pure unconditional love and truth, in which awakening, connection to the spirit world and your higher self is exponentially amplified. So without further ado, I'd love to have these wonderful teachers guide us through this incredible conversation.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's great to be here on the call with you today. I'm going to lead us off here and just introduce us a little bit to the topic, which is entering the shamanic realms. We've picked this topic because it's a powerful one in which actually we all have access to every day, all the time. The shamanic realms are actually our naturalness. They're actually a place when we're more awake to our psychic senses, to our telepathic knowing, to our inner guidance and our connection to our higher self, to all of our senses that are beyond. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we've been conditioned by our culture and our thinking and the past scientific history of Newtonian physics, which is we're just coming out of, to be in a more linear place where we're in our thinking mind and our logical mind. And in that space, we're not as connected to the mystical, to the magical, to the place where we can actually step from one reality to the place where all possibilities exist, the place where we can literally shift something in an instant. So we thought this would be a great topic to talk about because it's both something that I do on my retreats and that we experience in sacred sites and that those sites amplify. But it's also something that you could cultivate in your own lives, in your own world. And this talk is meant to be a combination of teaching so that you have some take-home value and you might learn something that you can actually then use and apply in your life, as well as a transmission of these realms, a transmission of the mystical, a transmission of the sacred sites that are these mystical realms. These areas are what we call the crack between the worlds. It's the time between daytime and nighttime. If you've ever noticed that when you're falling asleep at night, there's a kind of space that you go into when you're falling asleep where you're kind of in the dream, but you're not in the dream. You're awake, but you're not awake. And you're sort of in control of your dreams. It's often a time of lucidity for people, where they're actually conscious and awake, and yet they're dreaming. And in those realms, you may have noticed, or even if you've noticed in your dreams, that you have actual abilities that you don't have in your normal waking 3D reality. In those spaces, in those times, some people can fly. Some people can walk through walls. You can instantly shift from one scene to another. You can actually shift from anything to anything else. You can generate something out of nothing. The rules and laws of our 3D physical reality don't apply in those realms. And those realms are accessible to us as we fall asleep. And for some of us who have trained ourselves to dream lucidly, we can actually enter into those dream realms and we can navigate them with consciousness and control them. And that crack between the worlds, that time before sleep and awake, that time when the sun is setting and there's that twilight hour they call the witching hour, that's a space where the veils are thinner. Our right brain becomes much more engaged when we're falling asleep, and it moves into a different frequency. It moves into the alpha state rather than the normal beta brainwave frequency that we're in our everyday waking reality, which is very fast and very, very, very strong. So tonight, we're going to weave some stories together, some wisdom and some teachings, and we're going to focus somewhat on three different, I'd say, areas of focus, or actually, as you'll see, areas of defocus, where you could actually concentrate on practicing the cultivation of these things, and they will help you to enter into the shamanic realms. They'll help you to enter into mystical states and to cultivate your own psychic senses. Now, the sacred sites in Hawaii and Mount Shasta, these vortexes hold a natural energy that amplifies and accelerates and catalyzes all change and transformation. And they are the crack between the worlds. They are these mystical states. And therefore, when we enter into these sacred sites, it automatically begins to quicken that inside of us, which is of similar and like vibration. Parts of us that have been sleeping and dormant start to wake up. Our DNA wakes up. Our third eye flames on when we step into these places that are already vibrating these frequencies. So we found that there's three practices that help cultivate this. One of them is the practice of engaging in timelessness, or the practice of altering and shifting and changing one's experience of time. The other one is entering into states of nothingness, or the states of the void, or emptiness. And then a third primary practice to help enter into these states is entering into a state of what we call expanded perceptual awareness, or what the Hawaiians call hakalau. So we're going to now go ahead and dive into that subject matter. And we're going to start with timelessness. And really the first thing that I want to say about timelessness is that time doesn't exist. It doesn't actually exist. It's something that we've made up. It's a construct that we've created with our thinking mind, with our linear mind.
So it's a concept to talk about timelessness, and yet the experience of timelessness is quite another thing. And so really there is no way to enter into the realm of timelessness except by going there. And so I'd like to tell a story when I experienced a profound timelessness. It was during a ceremony I did, and I was in a cave for 4 days, and there was absolutely no light at all, and that will immediately take you into timelessness because, of course, you know, our days are scheduled by, okay, it's time to eat, and it's time to wash the dishes, it's time to go to bed, and so on. And we structure our entire reality, what magic is calling the 3D world. I love that. We structure this constantly. And when we step into the shamanic realms, one of the reasons we want to go there, because it's incredibly nourishing to let all that go, as I'm sure many of you have experienced, that when we let go of the constrictions and the structure of time, and we enter into another realm, we literally enter into other dimensions. And when we go to these places, our perceptions heighten, and we can access memory. We can recapitulate our experiences and memories, and we can gain access to abilities that we do not run on an everyday basis. So when I was in this this cave, you first go in there, and the first feeling when there is absolutely no light, it's like, of course, you want to know where things are, and you're disoriented in space. And at first you wonder, what am I gonna do here for 4 days? And because there is no light, there is no time. I mean, the time melts, and you just sleep whenever you feel like sleeping. And then you wonder, I was wondering, well, what am I going to do, while I'm awake? And so I began to recapitulate. I began to remember intermittently flashes of memory, hundreds and hundreds of memories. And in this cave, in this 4-day ceremony, one of the purposes of it was to find your death song. And that is a song that you never tell anyone your death song. You sing it with spirit, between yourself and spirit, when you are crossing over and you are leaving. And so I'm in this darkness and this timeless space, which is incredibly expansive. Timelessness for me is a complete expansion, and also it's a condensation into the moment. And what happens, one of the things that happen there, everything gets amplified. And one of the fears that many of you may also have, I have a fear of, mice, yeah. And so, I mean, I'm not like terribly terrified. I'm not like one of these women that just goes, oh my God, there's a mouse. But I'm sitting there, I'm laying there actually, and laying there in this darkness, timeless space. And I feel this little nibbling around my toes. I hear this little scratching. And of course, I kick it away or whatever, and then it returns. And so there was no place to go. And there was, no one to speak to. Someone brought me to the cave, and it was agreed upon they were going to come back 4 days later. And so I'm laying there, and I kind of got used to this nibbling at the feet. It was on my sleeping bag. It wasn't directly on my feet. So it was like, okay, I can deal with this. And it wouldn't do any good anyway to freak out. So I just got used to it. And I was pretty used to it. And then all of a sudden I started hearing like a scratching on my hair. And I determined that these were mice. They, like they could have been rats. I couldn't see them. I couldn't see anything. And so when all of your senses are, they're not functioning, you can't see, you can hear quite well. Hearing becomes quite amplified. And the sense of timelessness takes over. And then something really extraordinary happened. I mean, I had to make a choice. I was like, what was I going to do with this? Okay. And I went inside and I was like, okay, there's these, I decided they were mice, and very small mice. I decided they were, because, that's what I'm going to make up. They're not going to be like the rats that I saw, in New York. No, they were going to be these little mice. And so then, I really had a choice. And so I just calmed down, and I slowed everything down. And that's one of the things that happens in timelessness, is that the speed of things quickens or slows down according to your perceptions. When we are in timelessness, we move into the realm of fast thought, and we can assemble things very, very quickly. And so if we move into fear and we close down, then we're going to accelerate and amplify that experience. But if we develop the ability to calm down, and I began to talk to the mice, and I made an agreement with them, and I said, okay, you can go down by the feet. That's okay. I can handle that. But no more hair, and definitely not the ears. That's just not okay. And so, after the experience of, when someone came and brought in the light, the feeling of that light coming in, I don't think my experience of feeling sunlight has been the same since that time. This, was many, many years ago. And the sense of peace that happens within timelessness is one of the reasons we want to enter and go into these shamanic realms, is because there can be extraordinary healing and messages that we receive.
Yes, and there's so much powerful magic that can occur when we enter into these places. And I love that Amara talked about slowing down, because that's actually one of the ways we can practice entering into these realms. When we slow way down, we automatically start entering into a more multidimensional universe. Like if you've ever been in a car accident and there's that moment right before the car accident, but you know you're going to have an accident, when time just moves really, really slow.
Yeah.
And even though there's a big decision to make and a lot is happening, you can have all kinds of time to make decisions. You could run through many, many options because time has virtually slowed to a standstill and choices are available. Or as I was telling Amara the other day, my friend who was just telling me the other day, he had that situation and he saw the wall coming straight at him. And he was about to hit the wall when he blacked out. And sometime later, he has no idea how long. It could have been 1 minute. It could have been a year or 10 years, because in that timeless place, nothing existed. He was empty and he blacked out. When he came to, he was 200 feet away from where the wall was, parked on the side of the road with the car idling. He teleported somehow from having possibly a life-ending accident to sitting on the side of the road with his car idling. And this was an awakening experience for him because it made him realize there's something going on here that I don't understand. There's some magic and some mystery in these realms that I don't quite get.
Wow. I mean, that reminds me of a story and experience I went through. And the slowing down of time is very, very magical. And what happened for me, it was a Sunday morning here in Phoenix where I live. And at the time, I was on my way to the shooting range, to do some practice shooting. And so there was hardly any traffic Sunday. I'm driving down this double 4-lane and I'm just making a nice, easy turn, left turn. And all of a sudden, this car from the opposite side comes straight at me. And I had this completely timeless moment where I just very calmly, there's a sense of peace inside of there. I was very, very fortunate. And I just turned my car slowly to avoid this oncoming car that was going like 40 or 50 or something through the light. And so what I experienced in this timeless space was just like this calm, I call it magic, but it's like in clear choice. And afterwards, a lot of times you don't remember. I'm sure many of you have had this experience. You don't remember like how you did what you did. There's this like, just afterwards, it's like this like adrenaline rush that is extraordinary. And so I just drove to the shooting range. I met my friends there. We were having this match where it was like a speed match. And to be honest with you, I'm not like the greatest, shooter. It's just, something that, I have done. But this day we had this match and this acceleration. I mean, everything slowed down, but I was moving in incredible speed. We were doing this speed shooting contest where you're standing next to a person. And I just remember all day long, it lasted all day long. I would just slowly come to my holster and just take my gun and very easily point to the target. And I won the tournament, and I'm not a good shooter. I mean, I'm really not. And so, it was what struck me was like how long it lasts. I mean, I was as white as a sheet when I got there, and I was like shaking. And at the same time, that same kind of speeding up is the same kind of exhilaration that allows you to enter into the shamanic realm. And the practices that, you know, I have learned to stay in my body and to not freak out, I believe have literally saved my life. The awareness that comes in and the ability to stay completely present without any thinking. That's the other thing about when you are in that timelessness. You are not doing everyday thinking. There is no space for anything, for any distractions whatsoever. And you see things very, very, very clearly. And there is space in between times. And it feels quite effortless to move from one thing and then to the next.
Actually, I find that typically thought and timelessness are mutually exclusive. So when you're thinking, you're automatically taking yourself out of the shamanic realms, out of the mystical realms, out of timelessness, because thought takes you into the left brain, which is 120 cycles per second. It's very narrow, it's very linear. It's about computation, analysis, and sequence. It's not about more and multitudes. I remember when almost 20 years ago when I started working with this kahuna in Hawaii. He lives in the jungle. He's not a public figure. He doesn't teach classes. He owns no possessions other than a couple of sarongs. He lives on the ground in the jungle in a heiau, or a sacred site, a vortex. He has tattoos across his face and his entire body. And he says he's from 500 years in the future, and he's here to help with the ascension of the planet. And when people get around him, his frequency and vibration starts their watches spinning, and they start having shifting inside of themselves. People go into a deep trance. Sometimes they start drooling. And I remember driving him around, and every few seconds he would say to me, "Slow down." And I'd look, and I'm not going fast at all. And then a few minutes would go by, and he'd say, "Slow down." And I'm like, gosh, I'm only going like 20 miles an hour down these back roads of Maui. And then slow down, over and over and over again, until at some point I started to get it. He's not talking about the car. He's talking about the speed at which I'm moving. I'm moving at the speed of my mind, which takes me right out of my mystical nature. And I take people on retreats, and I remember one time I took a bunch of people to this powerful sacred cave system called the Menehune Caves, where these ancient shamanic creatures made these secret caves that are all powerful, and they amplify and catalyze, and they wake us up into the present moment fully. And I hadn't quite transmitted to them the full value of really slowing down, like actually move your body slower, like move in slow motion, stop, move slowly. And so they had no experience there. There was no mystical experience, no epiphanies, no ahas, no realizations, because they were all talking to each other and moving very quickly. And then once I told them about slowing down and got them to practice, then the next time we went, voila, they're all having these life-changing experiences. There's so much magic in it. I really need a lot of private retreats. So for one day up to a few weeks with a couple or a group or an individual. And there's this one sacred healing temple on Maui that I typically take people to. And I mean, I've seen healings there. I've seen people walk in with terminal disease and walk out without it. These sites are very potent. You can walk in with anything you've been challenged by in your life and walk out, and it's different. Belief systems can leave, doubts can disappear, fears can go away, or you can birth something into the world that's never existed before. These sites are very potent. So I took clients there, and I would do a transmission with them and do my healing work. And then I would say, now I want you to go into this temple and have your own direct experience after I'd opened the doorways and the portals and done my work. And after taking people there for many years, I started getting guided that while they were in the temple, I would go walking up this trail, which is part of the overall sacred site, but in a different place. And I would go walking on that trail for miles sometimes while my client is sitting down in the temple. And I would move into this space of timelessness, of total emptiness in my being, no thoughts, just moving like a baby, waiting for something to move me or pull my attention or where to go. And I would get these messages and have these quickenings and downloads from my client, which I would bring back to them later. But the interesting thing was, I had no idea how long my client was going to spend in that temple. Were they going to spend 5 minutes, or were they going to spend 2 hours? We had no agreements about that. I said, go in the temple and come out when you're done. And I would walk on the trail and wait till I just felt this internal sense that I teach people how to get for themselves on the retreats that told me it's time to go back. So after doing this for 2 years and always getting back within a minute or two of the person coming out of the temple, I told one of my clients that I was going to do this. I'd never told anybody this before. I said, hey, I'm going to go walking up here. Send me a telepathic message when you're done. Walk out of the temple and I'll meet you there. And I went hiking about 1.5 miles or so up this hill. And then as I was walking, it's like I felt the viscosity of the air got thicker. And it's almost like I was moving upstream. And I felt that and I was like, feels like it's time to go back. And I turned around and looked the other way and it felt like downstream. So I turned around and I went back to the temple. Took me about 45 minutes to get back. I arrived. She had just walked out of the temple. She's putting her shoes on. And she said, you're right on time. And I said, yes, great. And then she said, did you get my telepathic message? And I said, well, I must have, because here I am. And then I started thinking about it. And I said, well, when did you send that message? And she said, well, I sent it about 5 minutes ago. Well, I got the message 45 minutes ago. She sent it 5 minutes ago, but I got it 45 minutes ago. Time does not exist. When you step into the emptiness of who you really are, you are not your thoughts. You are not your opinions. You are not Michael or Carol or Rob or Shauna. Those are all aberrations, temporary. They're conditioning. And as long as we're in all of that, these realms aren't available to us. But as soon as we step out of them and we step into a place of more emptiness, of more nothingness, then we're in the place. You know, we're talking about timelessness and emptiness and the void and expanded perceptual awareness, and they're really all part of the same thing. We're trying to separate them and break them down a bit, but they're part of the same thing. When you're in timelessness, you're in emptiness. When you're in emptiness, you're in timelessness. These are you know, sides of the same coin. You know, when the Kahuna was in Vietnam that I studied with, he was one of 6 people that survived a battle that thousands died in. And I asked him, how did you survive? And he said, I just didn't let the bullets hit me. You know, he slowed time down so much that he could see the bullets coming. And then he just avoided them like in the Matrix. I worked with a professional baseball player and one-on-one coaching. And he'd had trouble hitting against certain pitchers. He said when he would hit against them, it was like the ball was coming 1,000,000 miles an hour. It was the size of a piece of bubble gum, and he could hear all the fans and all the noise, and he could hear voices in his head telling him that he wasn't going to do good and he wasn't going to hit the ball, and it was overwhelming, and he had an extremely low batting average against this person, or actually people. But there were other people that he batted against where he said it's like the baseball was coming at him and it was the size of a basketball. And there was utter silence. He could hear nothing. He had no concept of himself even existing. No fans, no baseball. He was in what they would call the zone. The zone is just the state of emptiness, of timelessness. When a quarterback is dropped back in the pocket and they can feel somebody coming up behind them, that is them in the emptiness, and they can feel and see and hear more than we normally do. All I did with that baseball player, I did some complicated mystical change work with him. But ultimately, all I did with him was shift his internal reality so that he was in timelessness and emptiness every time he stepped up to the plate. He went from one of the worst in the Major League Baseball the year before I worked with him to the third best in the entire league the year after I worked with him. It was an extraordinary experience for me. I was only about 28 years old to witness what can happen when we step into these realms. But we have to slow way down. It's like if you've ever been snorkeling. And I remember when I first started snorkeling, I wanted to see everything. So I was moving really fast through the water, swimming all around. It took me a while to realize that I was missing about 90% of what was there because I was moving so fast. It wasn't until I slowed way down and just hovered above the coral that I started seeing the octopus and the sea cucumbers and the moray eels and some of the sea urchin and all of the different variations of coral that were down there that I couldn't see when I was moving that fast. It's radical what happens when we slow down.
Yes, and we're talking about going to these magical places, and I fully agree that because of the frequencies of certain places, certain places have they have memories that things have happened there for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. Let's say healings have occurred or birthings have occurred in a certain place, and the vibrations or the frequency, it does soak into the earth, and it soaks into the trees nearby, and it soaks into the environment nearby, so that the frequency of places indeed changes, not to mention the ley lines and the meridians and so forth. And so, yes, the frequencies in certain places definitely amplify, and that's why we like to go there. They amplify our ability to harmonize with the frequency of the place, which is it's interesting. The frequency is very fast. We're in faster thought, and yet we therefore experience it as much slower. And yet we, as we said in the beginning, all of the practices that, I'm sure many of you do, we do not need to go to the place. When in fact, the more we do in our daily life to slow down in the same manner, because, for me, that's where it's at, is in our daily life. And so when we start to live this way, when we start to actually slow ourselves down, the purpose of this is to live in a state of expanded awareness, where our assemblage of reality is different. We call it now the assemblage point begins to shift. And so where you perceive from is more from your center rather than distracted and off kilter. So when you are experiencing and you bring your energy into your center, into what we call your shamanic root of power, when you bring your energy down there, there is a natural expansion of your awareness, and you can see more, you can feel more, you can taste more. Everything is heightened. And when you do this frequently, when you go into the mystical realms, what we call magical realms, what you find and discover is they start to bleed and seep and sink into your being, and it doesn't go away. And so you have these mystical experiences, and they last forever. They are encoded in your body. So it's not just an epiphany that disappears. It's a memory that you can always access. And so that, to me, is the purpose of collecting and accumulating these memories into these dimensions, because you can take them home. It seems like they slip away. It seems like we forget and we get back into the normal routine. However, when you need them, these memories are actually there. And they all when you have an experience that you need these things, you have this memory in your body, and therefore you can quicken your thought. You can cease what I call stopping the world. You can stop the world. You stop all the noise, you stop all the confusion, and no matter what is going on around you, within whatever is happening, whether it's a trip back home to see your family, or it is you're in the middle of teaching, or you're talking and doing a Zoom and your phone rings, you can just slow down and you can start to keep yourself slow, keep yourself calm within any place that you are. Okay. And so one of my teachers, I have a Buddhist teacher, and she's a Tibetan Buddhist, and I'm walking down my hallway in my house, and she was staying with us for a couple of weeks, and that is really an experience. Her frequency is extraordinary, and it has this dual quality of it's extremely powerful and peaceful and joyful and overwhelming. When she is in the space, that she's definitely in the space. She is the space, okay? And so you move within her frequency just by being in her presence, okay? And so I'm walking down the hall one morning, and, I'm kind of scowling, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do today? I'm planning the day, And she, I never forget, I hear this sound in my ear. She says, smile. She says, she's Chinese. She says, smile, and that was like a wake up call to me of how much time in our daily life are we going around and yet pulling ourselves out of the mystical realm. And by thinking, now there's a time and a place for thinking, okay, you do your taxes and so forth, you got to think, and that's got to be done. So of course, there's time and places for thinking. It's not bad, but the more you can exist and go into experiences with the ability to slow yourself down in time, no matter what else is happening, you can generate magic, and you will cause people to begin to tune into your frequency. It's a very strong frequency, and therefore you will cause other people to align with your speed. So if you want to slow a meeting down, or you want to slow lovemaking down, you slow down, and you will draw people to be attracted to your pace and your rhythm. It's a very, very deep quality to cultivate in yourself, is to be able to cause timelessness and to deliberately stop the world and shift into the root of your center. Because when you are in your center, you literally become the center of the universe, and everything begins to revolve around your center, and therefore you have a very different perception of reality. You can literally avoid danger and step into opportunities. You can see them. You can see where to go and where not to go.
Yeah, and these mystical realms, which is not necessarily just a place that you can enter in and out of, it's something that you can actually become, because it's actually what you already are.
Oh.
And so when we go to these sacred sites in Hawaii or in Mount Shasta, what we're doing is we're going to places that quicken us into who we really are, quicken us into our true nature. They heal the conditioning that has us in this illusion of separation from the infinite, from God, from love. And in that space, when that resolves and heals, then yes, we're in the nothingness. Yes, we're in the infiniteness. And actually, we can step from one reality to the other in any way, shape, or manner. You know, in quantum physics, they say there's an infinite number of parallel universes that are coexisting at the same time, and they're all happening now, right now. There's the you that's rich and the you that's poor. The you that's fully awakened in the oneness of unity consciousness with all that is, and the you that's living in a fearful, separate, sequestered reality of stress and fear. There's the you that is in a beautiful, extraordinary relationship with a romantic partner that is feeding and nourishing you both. And there's the you that's alone and feeling lonely. And all of the yous in between. And in these realms that we're talking about, which you can be in all the time, it's just that most of us are not. So we go out to a place like Hawaii where it's actually already there, and we quicken ourselves to it. And like a balloon that gets blown up, if you let the air out of it, it can never contract to the same shape that it was before. It's always expanded. When people go on these retreats, they don't come back and forget and lose touch with what they learned. They're shifted and changed forever. The Hawaiians, you know, in Western world, when they wanted to build a place to worship God, whether it was in Christianity or Judaism or Islam or whatever the religion, they would go typically, and they would just find a place that seemed like a good place to build a church or a temple. It's like, oh, well, we put our homes over here, and you know, we put the refuge place over here, and that'd be a good place for a church. And they would build it there. And because they built it, it would become a place of God and a place of worship. And it would be the morphogenetic field, as Rupert Sheldrake would say, that would form the energy of that place being worship. But the Hawaiians, it was different. They actually saw that there were places where the land was concentrated with specific energy that wakes people up. There's specific sites that are concentrated with the energy of connecting you with your higher self. Specific sites that are already concentrated with the energy of birthing something new into the world, manifesting something out of nothing, the creation of things. There's another site that's about death, change, and transformation. It's about the snake shedding its skin, the release of the old, letting go of beliefs and doubts. And that when they walked into these sites, the rules and laws of our Western 3D world were out the window, didn't exist, and anything could happen. You could walk in and let something go that had been haunting you your whole life, and it's gone. And you're a different person when you walk out. Those are the things that happen on these retreats over and over and over and over again. I'd say 90% of all people that have been on a retreat with me would say it was a life-changing experience. Their life was before it and after it. And one of the realms, we talked about timelessness and slowing down, but there's also this place of entering into the void, entering into nothingness. I discovered this in college and I was practicing it. I would lay face down in the hot tub and I would float around and listen to the bubbles and just completely release into the emptiness and the void. And I would stay floating face down in the hot tub for sometimes what seemed like an eternity. And my friend one time, he would get nervous when I would do this. And he said, well, you got to give me some time frame when I can pull you out because I'm afraid you're going to drown. And I said, well, I guess, you know, if I'm down there for, you know, 6 or 8 minutes or something, you can pull me out. And so I closed my eyes. I went face down. I began to listen to the bubbles and just move into the void. And I disappeared. The hot tub disappeared. The bubbles disappeared. Magic, did not exist anymore. All of the identity was gone because all of that is just my thoughts. Who's there when there's no thoughts? What are you when the thoughts aren't there? They're not you. The real me was what I was in touch with in that moment. And I was that's not actually a true statement because I wasn't in touch with it because I wasn't there. There was no me. I was completely in the void. I could have been there for 10,000 years, or I could have been there for 1 minute. And then all of a sudden I felt something, the strangest sensation maybe to this day in my life. It was like this suction was happening, and I heard these strange sounds and gurgling, and suddenly I was feeling wetness and heat, and I didn't know where I was or what was happening. I thought I might be actually being birthed. I'm like, what's going on? My friend had gotten panicked because I'd been down there for 6 minutes, and he wrapped his arms around me and was pulling me out. He said I felt like I weighed 300 pounds, and he's a big, strong guy. I don't think that I can actually hold my breath for 6 minutes. I think I entered into the realms where holding your breath or not holding your breath don't matter. It's the realm of the void, the emptiness, and the nothingness. And it comes when we let go of the idea of who we are. I was hiking through the forest and in a sacred site, and this tree called me over to it. It said, come here. And so I walked over to this tree. It was an elder tree. And it said to me, you're too much in the mind. Sit with me, and I will quicken you to the emptiness that is who and what you really are. I will wake you up to that frequency and vibration. And I sat and meditated with that tree, and I disappeared. And a little bit of the wound inside of me that held on to my identity as something that gave me some security also disappeared.
Beautiful, beautiful. For me, this reminds me of a time when I was in here in Arizona, in a place where I went into the forest to be by myself for 7 days, and with very little food. I just cut down all the distractions, and you just have some water and a little bit of fruit for 7 days, and again with like absolutely nothing to do. And so in the beginning, I went through thinking about everything. And honestly, I just ran out of being able to think about anything else, because after, a day or so, you just cannot not hold on to keep on doing that. And so after I just let everything go and reviewed my whole life, I decided to just go in the morning to the water. I chose a place by a stream. And for me, this place of nothingness is exquisite. It's exquisitely sweet. And so I went down to the stream, and I took I have a sacred pipe, a chanupa. We took a sacred pipe with me, and was sitting by the water, and I don't remember how. I think I ran out of things to think, but I just was in this just pure place with grooving into the water and just looking at the ripples on the water for hours. And I went just to see the sunset. Yeah. And so just as the sun was coming up, these butterflies, they started to land on and then they started landing on my pipe. And there was like 3 or 4, and then 5 or 6. And pretty soon there was like about 20 butterflies just sitting there with me. And the beauty, and I didn't even interrupt it by saying, oh, this is, to myself even, oh, this is really beautiful. I just stayed there, and I just felt the breath of their wings on my skin and the beauty of their color. And so, when the sun went up a little bit more, they would go away. And then I chose to do this. I was there for 7 days. So I chose to do this for the next 4 days. And every single day there was more. I was literally, my shoulders, my head, there was butterflies all over me. And I later learned, that, one of the medicine signs, I didn't learn it, I experienced it. The medicine of the butterfly is they are they're attracted to like peace, and they're attracted to power, and they're attracted to this exquisite quiet. And so they're repelled. They don't like to hang around conflict or disturbance or, too much trouble. So they're attracted to peace. And so what I remember is like the last day I'm starting to pack up, and I'm starting to think about, someone's going to pick me up, and I'm finally going to get to eat. And, so my mind went and shifted to a different place. And I go into to the stream on the last day, and guess what? There was no butterflies, and they knew I was leaving, and they could feel the shift in my awareness, and that sweetness of those beautiful butterflies that was like 15 years ago for me. It has never left me. That sweetness and that peace and that beauty is existence. And I completely agree that we're not going any place to find mystical experiences or find ecstasy or find joy or whatever. This is who we truly are. This is who, when we slow down, when we calm down, when we agree to enter into these spaces and we quit trying, it's really more a question of completely letting go. Yes, there are things that we can prepare ourselves and things that we can do that work. And really, it's about letting go of what we're doing all the time that is so nourishing and very, very deeply healing.
Yes, and when we step into these realms, as I keep bringing us back to, there's such magic and mystery available, as Amara was just telling a story about, but there's so many different ways that can show up.
Yes.
There was a retreat a few years ago where there was a lady on the retreat, and she had been molested, and it had been a debilitating trauma for her the rest of her life. And she was probably in her 40s. She had not been able to heal it. She'd been haunted by the images of this man her whole life. And she had a lot of fears that had built up. A man could not stand behind her without her getting very, very nervous and upset. And a lot of other things. And, I taught her a technique of how to actually love herself, like a tangible technique of how to love what is inside of you. And then I also taught her about these different things. She was on a group retreat in Hawaii, and we talked about slowing down and moving into timelessness and nothingness. And, we had more than just a little hour call here. So we went deep into it, and we transmitted it, and we created a container over the course of our time together for a week, which, by the way, on a Hawaii retreat, I teach an ancient Hawaiian technique so that we change our experience of time to instead be a week together. It feels like a month. And I see there's some people on this call who have been on these retreats and could probably attest to that. It's an incredible thing to experience something to be much longer than it is. You've probably been in a yoga pose where you felt like the pose lasted for 2 minutes, even though it was 20 seconds. That's kind of, a relative experience of time. Imagine if you had the ability to do that at will, right? And so we expand time, and she was really in this and living it. And then when we went to these vortexes, she started having these experiences where these ancient Hawaiian kahuna were visiting her, and they were doing healings on her. They were, I remember one of the things they did, and this is, an hour and a half story by itself, all the things that happened to her, but they were pulling these red threads out of her that connected her and linked her back to that memory. And then they brought the image of this man up who she'd always seen at the age that he molested her. And then, he was long dead and had aged to, 60, 70 years old, but she always had him as the same age he molested her. These kahunas brought this man up in front of her, and they just aged him right before her very eyes as she went through a grieving process and released cathartically all of these traumas and wounds from her body. As the man aged, so did all the traumas as they released out of her, until the end of it, they had all released, and she's feeling light and energized and clear. And then later there were men walking behind her, and she was okay with it. It healed her at a profound level. This is what happens when we're not in time.
Yeah. Wow. I can't wait. I can't wait to go.
We'll be there soon.
Yeah, it's going, you know, time is going to speed up, you know, it's going to be like tomorrow. Yeah. So I really enjoyed this conversation, Magic, and I'm really happy that we can share stories. And now we do want to complete this evening, and we want to thank all of you for coming, and we will read all of your comments, and we will continue some of these conversations. You know, we hear really good feedback, because I'm certainly enjoying what is happening. And Magic has a few things to say in closing, because I believe you are going to have another talk. Is that right?
I'm getting a tremendous amount of feedback all of a sudden, and it's all just an echo and very hard to hear myself or others. Joella, anything you can do about that?
Yeah, no, it just occurred. I don't know what's going on.
Is this occurring for anybody else? It's not if you're having a problem. Yeah?
Yeah, everyone's going through it. It might be the link.
Okay. Well, I want to try to wrap this up, and there's also somebody, if you can hear me, there's actually a couple of people who have participated, and one of them is a private chat and said she'd love to tell you guys a little bit, a quick testimonial about what happens out on these sacred sites, but I don't know if you want to hear anything.
That's just technology for you.
Well,
I will share though. I'm going to just share my screen really quick. Amar and Shana, Amar and Magic are leading Mystical Heart Retreat in Maui, July 7th through the 14th. You could register or find out more information on these links. And I will follow up an email with everyone for another link for tomorrow, specifically about the retreat. I'm sorry about the technological issue.
Well, that was hard to hear. You want to say something, Laura?
I think we messed with them. So I'm sure that the transmission got through, and
there's still people online, right?
And you know, if people want to stay in touch, we'll shoot out an email, because we'd like to just tell you about tomorrow night. Magic is giving another one of these talks. His talk specifically about this retreat and some of the details. So if you want to find out more, go to Magic's Facebook page and sign up for the talk with Magic tomorrow night.
Okay, thank you everyone. We're going to wrap this up. The feedback is crazy. If you want to try to sign back in a few minutes, maybe we'll see if we can just say what we can do right now. So we're going to hang up, and I'm going to get back on in 2 minutes if you want to try to. Otherwise, bless you both. Thank you so much. I hope to see you sometime. Aloha.
Ciao. Aloha.